you ever felt that strange sensation when you're dreaming and suddenly realize something is watching you? That moment when your breath catches because you can feel eyes boring into your back? I used to think dreams were just dreams, random firings of a sleeping mind, nothing to fear. I was wrong. Welcome to the Obscuralore Vault. Today I'm going to tell you about my family's dream journals and the ancient thing that's been stalking us for generations. My name is Daniel Whitaker. What I'm about to share might sound impossible, but I swear every word is true. My family has kept dream journals since 1887. It began with my great-great-grandfather Edward, continued through every generation, and now to me. I never took the tradition seriously until 3 months ago, when my grandmother died and left me our ancestral home. In the attic, I found a trunk filled with journals, dozens of them spanning over 130 years. I started reading them out of curiosity, then out of fear, then out of desperation, because I realized we've all been dreaming about the same entity, and I think it knows I've discovered it. Part 1. The Inheritance. The day I moved into my grandmother's house was bright and sunny, which feels wrong in retrospect. A dark day would have been more fitting for what awaited me. "You don't have to take the house," my mother had said. "We could sell it." But I needed a fresh start. My marriage had collapsed 6 months earlier. My job at the university's psychology department felt increasingly hollow, and I'd been having trouble sleeping. The Whitaker house stood at the end of a winding driveway, partially hidden by old oak trees. 3 stories of weathered brick and dark wood. My family had lived there for generations, but I'd only visited occasionally as a child. As I turned the key in the front door, I felt a strange resistance, as if the house itself didn't want to admit me. Then the lock clicked, and I stepped inside. The air inside was stale, thick with dust and memories. My grandmother had been living in a nursing home for the last 2 years of her life, and the house had remained empty. My footsteps echoed across the hardwood floors as I explored what was now mine. On the second day, I ventured into the attic. That's when everything changed. The attic door was heavy, made of solid oak. It opened with a groan that made the hair on my arms stand up. The space beyond was surprisingly large, with dormer windows letting in thin rectangles of light that cut through the dust. At the far end sat an old trunk with brass fittings. The lock was ornate, but broken. When I lifted the lid, the smell of old paper and leather wafted up. Inside were the journals, dozens of them, different sizes and colors, some bound in leather, others in cloth. The oldest ones were at the bottom, their pages yellow and brittle. I picked up the earliest one. On the first page, in faded ink, were written the words, "Edward Whitaker, Dream Journal, 1887. I spent the rest of that day reading my great-great-grandfather's journal. His handwriting was elegant, but difficult to decipher. Most entries described ordinary dreams, flying over fields, conversations with dead relatives, finding himself unprepared for examinations. But then I found the first mention of what I would come to know as the Watcher. April 17th, 1887. Had the strangest dream last night. I was walking through a forest I did not recognize. The trees were wrong somehow, too tall, too thin, with bark that seemed to pulse like flesh. I felt something behind me, keeping pace. When I turned, I saw nothing, but I knew it was there. It stayed at the edge of my vision, a patch of deeper shadow. When I tried to look directly at it, it slipped away, but I could feel its hunger. I woke, sweating, convinced it had followed me out of the dream. I might have dismissed this as a one-time nightmare, except 3 weeks later, May 8th, 1887. It returned, the shadow from the forest. This time, I was in my childhood home. It stood in the corner of my bedroom, watching, I could not move or cry out. It seemed taller than before, its edges less defined. When I finally managed to turn my head away, I heard it speak, not in words, but in the sound of dry leaves scraping across stone. I fear I am losing my mind. I set the journal aside, oddly unsettled. I told myself it was just the atmosphere of the old house playing with my imagination. I decided to skip ahead, picking up a journal from 1923, belonging to my great-grandfather William. The first few entries were mundane, but then, February 12th, 1923. Father always told me to record my dreams, but I never understood why until now. Last night, I dreamed of a shadow that watched me from the doorway of my room. It had no face that I could see, but I knew it was looking at me. When I tried to scream, my voice made no sound. The strangest part was that it felt familiar, as if I had seen it before, though I know I haven't. Or have I? My mouth went dry. I grabbed another journal, this one from 1956, my grandfather Richard's, September 3rd, 1956. The shadow entity appeared again. This time it was bolder. It stood at the foot of my bed, its form tall and thin, stretching up to the ceiling. It reached out with what might have been a hand, though the fingers were too long, too numerous. Margaret didn't wake, even when I cried out. When morning came, I found black smudges on the bedsheet where it had stood. With shaking hands, I opened my grandmother's most recent journal, January 15th, 2022. It knows I'm dying. After all these years, the watcher seems eager. It stands closer now, no longer hiding in the corners. Sometimes I think I can see a face forming in the darkness, something ancient and patient. I fear for Daniel. He has his father's sensitivity. The watcher will find him easily. I slammed the journal shut, my heart pounding. My grandmother had written about me. She knew something would come for me. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the journals, about generations of my family haunted by the same presence. Was it possible? Some kind of shared delusion passed down through stories. But my grandmother had never told me about the watcher. None of them had. When I finally drifted off near dawn, I had my first dream of the watcher. Part 2. The first dream. In my dream, I was back in the attic. The trunk was open, journals scattered around me, but the attic stretched on forever, the walls dissolving into darkness. I could feel a draft, cold air brushing the back of my neck, and I knew I wasn't alone. I tried to turn around, but my body wouldn't respond. The footsteps grew closer. Something was standing right behind me, close enough that I should have felt its breath, but whatever it was didn't breathe. A voice spoke, not in my ear but inside my mind. Finally, the last Whitaker. I jolted awake, tangled in my sheets, gasping for air. The room was dark, but for a moment I could have sworn I saw a tall figure retreating into the corner, melting into the shadows. I flipped on the light and stayed awake until morning. The next day I started my own dream journal. I wrote down every detail I could remember: the endless attic, the cold presence, the voice. I told myself I was being ridiculous, influenced by reading my ancestors' journals. But deep down I knew better. There had been a familiarity to the fear I felt, like recognizing a scent from childhood. I spent the next week diving deeper into the journals, looking for patterns, for explanations. I created a timeline of encounters, noting similarities. The entity always appeared in familiar settings: homes, workplaces, childhood locations. It always stayed at the edge of perception at first, growing bolder with each visitation. And it spoke only rarely, but when it did, the dreamer always remembered its exact words. By the third night in the house, the dreams had intensified. I found myself walking down the main staircase of the house. It was dark, but I could navigate by the faint light coming from somewhere below. As I descended, I noticed the stairs seemed to multiply, the bottom never getting closer. Then I saw it, a figure standing at the bottom of the stairs, tall and thin, darker than the darkness around it. It raised what might have been an arm, beckoning. "Come down, Daniel. I've waited for you." The voice was dry and ancient, like dust settling on forgotten tombs. I tried to turn back, but the stairs behind me had vanished. There was nowhere to go but down. Each step brought me closer to the figure. It remained motionless, patient. When I was halfway down, it tilted what should have been its head. "You read about me, you know me now." I woke up on the stairs, halfway down from the second floor. I was sleepwalking, something I hadn't done since childhood. The next morning I called my mother. "Did Grandma ever talk about her dreams?" I asked after our usual pleasantries. A pause. "Why do you ask?" "I found some journals in the attic. Dream journals. Apparently it's been a family tradition since great-great-grandpa Edward's time." Another pause, longer this time. "Mom always was private about her dreams. Said it was important to write them down, but never shared why. Your grandfather was the same way." "Did Dad keep a journal too? Before he died?" "Yes, he was adamant about it. Used to wake up in the middle of the night sometimes to write things down." My father had died when I was 10. Car accident. Or at least, that's what I'd been told. "Where's his journal now?" "I don't know. I never found it after the accident." That night, I dreamed again. I was in a long corridor lined with doors. I knew, with dream logic, that each door led to a room where another Whitaker slept and dreamed. Behind me I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. The watcher was coming down the hall, checking each room. I ran, trying doors as I passed, all locked. The footsteps behind me never quickened, but somehow stayed the same distance behind me no matter how fast I moved. Finally, a door opened. I rushed inside and slammed it shut. I was in my childhood bedroom. On the bed lay a small figure, myself as a child. A voice came from the closet. "He found me here too." My father stepped out, but wrong somehow. His skin was grey, his movements jerky. "It didn't start with Edward, Daniel. It's older than the journals, older than our family name." "What is it?" I asked. My father's face contorted, melting like wax. "It feeds on nightmares, on fear, on the Whitaker bloodline. We taste different to it." Before I could ask more, the bedroom door burst open. The watcher stood in the doorway, a void shaped like a person, stretching up to the ceiling and beyond. My father screamed, and his face became a black hole, sucking in light and sound. I woke, clutching my chest, heart racing. Dawn light filtered through the curtains, but I didn't feel safe. I fumbled for my phone and, with shaking hands, searched for generational nightmares and family hauntings. Most results were fiction or paranormal blogs with little substance, but one scholarly article caught my eye. Transgenerational Trauma and Shared Dream Imagery by Dr. Eleanor Patel. According to Dr. Patel, families who experienced collective trauma sometimes reported similar dream imagery across generations. She mentioned cases of Holocaust survivors' descendants dreaming of camps they'd never seen, of Native Americans dreaming ancestral memories of massacres. But this was different. The Watcher wasn't a memory of trauma. It was something active, aware, hunting us through our dreams. I needed to understand what we were dealing with. Part 3. The Research. The local university library had an extensive section on folklore, mythology, and the occult. As a former academic, I still had access privileges. I spent days there, searching for anything that might explain what my family had experienced. I found references to dream predators across cultures, the night hag in European folklore, Mara in Scandinavian traditions, the Alp in German stories. Entities that visited sleepers and fed on their fear or life force. But none quite matched what I was looking for until I found an obscure text on Mesopotamian sleep demons. The book described an entity called Pasusu, the Watcher, that attached itself to bloodlines, haunting generations of the same family. According to the text, the Pasusu was neither ghost nor demon, but something older, a parasite that existed in the liminal space between waking and dreaming. It would select a family with a particular mental flavor and feed on their nightmares for generations, growing stronger with each dreamer it consumed. The final paragraph chilled me. When the Pasusu has fed on sufficient generations of a bloodline, it may attempt a complete crossing, using the last dreamer as a vessel to enter the waking world. I returned to the house with a mix of terror and grim determination. I was fairly certain I was the last of the Whitaker line. My parents had no other children. I had no children of my own. If the entity, the Pasusu, had been building towards something for over a century, I was its final target. That night I tried to stay awake. I made coffee, turned on all the lights, played loud music, but around 3 a.m., exhaustion claimed me. In my dream, I was in the attic again, but it had changed. The walls were covered in what looked like thick black veins, pulsing slightly. The trunk of journals was open, but instead of books, it contained dark water, perfectly still. The Watcher stood on the other side of the trunk. For the first time I could see details of its form. It was humanoid but wrong, too tall, limbs too long and jointed in extra places. Its skin was like oil on water, shimmering with impossible colors. Where a face should have been was a void, a perfect absence of anything. "You've been studying me," it said. The voice came from everywhere at once. They all tried. Edward with his prayers, William with his rituals, Richard with his medicines, Elizabeth with her psychology. It moved around the trunk, unnaturally smooth. "But you recognize me. You've given me a name." "Pasusu," I whispered. The thing shuddered, seeming to grow larger. "Names have power, but knowing mine gives you no advantage. I've consumed 4 generations of your nightmares, your fears, your dream deaths. You are the last vessel, Daniel Whitaker, the last door." It reached for me with too many fingers. "After you, I will be free." I backed away, but the attic had shrunk, walls closing in. Free for what? The void of its face split open, revealing rows of teeth arranged in concentric circles, stretching down an impossible throat. To hunt in the waking world. I woke screaming, clawing at my face. On my cheeks were black smudges, like someone had pressed sooty fingers against my skin. The next day, I returned to the library with renewed urgency. I needed to find a way to stop the Pasusu before it consumed me completely. Most sources were frustratingly vague about fighting dream entities. Some suggested lucid dreaming as a defense, taking control of the dream to confront the entity. Others recommended protective charms and rituals, but one account stood out, the case of the Arnaud family in 19th century France. According to the text, they had been haunted by a similar entity for generations until the last descendant, Marie Arnaud, supposedly defeated it. The account provided no details on how she accomplished this, only that she turned the entity's hunger against itself. I needed more information. I searched for any mention of Marie Arnaud and eventually found a reference to her personal papers being acquired by a collection at Oxford University. It would take weeks to get access through proper channels. I didn't have weeks. That night, the dream was different. I stood in a vast, dark space, No walls, no ceiling, just endless darkness. Beneath my feet was water, perfectly still, reflecting nothing. The Pasusu circled me like a shark, just out of clear sight. I could feel its hunger, its anticipation. "You're looking for salvation," it said, amusement in its ancient voice. "Like all the others. But Marie Arnaud can't help you." I froze. "How do you know about—" "I taste your thoughts when you dream, Daniel. I know your plans, your hopes, your fears." It came closer, and I caught a glimpse of its fluid, ever-changing form. "Marie tricked one of my kind, but her method won't work for you. My connection to your bloodline is too strong now." "Why us?" I demanded. "Why the Whitakers?" The Pasusu made a sound like stones grinding together, laughter. "Edward invited me. He was a dabbler in the occult, did you know? Seeking forbidden knowledge. He performed a ritual to glimpse beyond the veil of sleep. He opened the doors and I came through. Images flashed through my mind. My great-great-grandfather in a candle-lit room, drawing symbols on the floor, chanting words in a language I didn't recognize, his eyes wild with excitement, then terror as shadows gathered around him. He tried to banish me, but blood binds. What one Whitaker began, only the last Whitaker can end. It lunged suddenly, its form expanding like black ink in water. I tried to run, but the surface beneath me turned to thick mud, holding me in place. The Pasusu loomed over me, its void face inches from mine. 3 more nights, Daniel. 3 more feedings, and I will have enough strength to cross over. On the 3rd night you will dream your final dream. I woke, gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat. Outside, dawn was breaking, but I felt no relief. 3 nights. I had 3 nights to find a way to stop the Pasusu, or to become its final meal. Part 4. The Journals Revisited. With renewed desperation, I returned to the journals. If Edward had accidentally summoned this thing, perhaps one of my ancestors had discovered a way to fight it. I started with Edward's later entries, after his first encounters with the Watcher. His writings became increasingly frantic over time. November 3rd, 1887. It grows stronger. Last night it spoke again, claiming my firstborn son will inherit my curse. I have tried holy water, prayers, protective circles. Nothing banishes it from my dreams. My wife worries for my sanity. How can I tell her that my nightmares are reaching for our unborn child? December 24th, 1887. I consulted a medium today against all my better judgment. She turned pale when I described my visitor. She said it is a Pasusu, a feeder on fear that grows within a bloodline. She warned me that it cannot be banished now that it has tasted my fear. It will merely hibernate until another Whitaker dreams. God forgive me for what I've brought upon my descendants. I skipped ahead to my great-grandfather William's journal, July 17, 1923. Father's journals warned me this day would come. The shadow has found me in my dreams. I tried his methods, the protective charms, the dream rituals, but nothing works. I can only record my experiences and hope that someday one of us will find a way to end this curse. I've begun researching other families with similar hauntings. There must be precedent. There must be a solution. On the final pages of William's journal, I found something promising. October 3rd, 1929. I've received correspondence from France regarding the Arnaud case. Apparently, Marie Arnaud left detailed records of her encounter with a similar entity. Her papers are held privately by her descendants in Bordeaux. I've written to request access, but in these troubled economic times, international travel seems impossible. If only I could see those documents. Marie's account may be our family's only hope. My grandfather Richard's journals contained no mention of the Arnaud papers. Instead, his entries tracked the entity's growing power. June 12, 1957. The shadow creature can affect the physical world now. I found my son's bedroom door open this morning, though I distinctly remember closing it. When I asked if he had bad dreams, he described a tall shadow man standing by his bed. It's found Richard Jr. already. My poor boy. My father's journal was missing, but my grandmother's contained a crucial entry. April 30th, 1985. Richard Jr.'s death wasn't an accident. The entity has grown strong enough to influence events in the waking world. The brake lines didn't fail by chance. My son knew too much. He had found something in his research, something about stopping the Pasusu. The night before his accident, he called me, excited about a discovery in some French woman's papers. I fear the entity silenced him before he could tell anyone else. My blood ran cold. The entity had killed my father? Had it been growing powerful enough to affect the physical world even back then? The final entries in my grandmother's journal were sparse but revealing. December 18th, 2021. I've hidden everything I could find about the Pasusu in the house. If Daniel inherits this place, he'll need the knowledge. The key is in understanding its nature. It doesn't just feed on fear. It feeds on the specific resonance of Whitaker nightmares. Marie Arnaud wrote that such entities are like mirrors. They reflect and amplify what they consume. This is both their strength and their weakness. The entry ended there. What did she mean about mirrors? About resonance? I closed the journal, mind racing. If my father had discovered something in Marie Arnaud's papers right before his death, then that information was my best hope. But how could I access it after all these years? I searched the house methodically, looking for anything my grandmother might have hidden. In her bedroom, behind a loose panel in the closet, I found a small wooden box. Inside was a key and a business card for Arnaud Collection Private Archives, Bordeaux, France. On the back of the card, in my father's handwriting, the mirror method. Feed it what it cannot digest. It wasn't much, but it was a clue. I needed to know more about this mirror method. With only 3 nights remaining before the Pasusu's final attempt, I couldn't travel to France. But perhaps I could request digital access to the Arnaud papers. I sent urgent emails to the address on the card, explaining that I was a researcher studying generational parasomnia, carefully avoiding any mention of the Pasusu. I offered a generous payment for expedited access to Marie Arnaud's writings. Then I prepared for another night of battle. This time I wouldn't just be a passive victim. I would try to control the dream, to confront the entity on my terms. I'd read about lucid dreaming techniques, recognizing you're in a dream and taking control. I went to bed repeating a mantra, I will know I'm dreaming, I will take control. The dream began in the family graveyard behind the house. Moonlight cast everything in silver and shadow. I stood before a freshly dug grave. The headstone bore my name and today's date. The Pasusu emerged from the open grave, unfolding like a dark origami creature, limbs extending unnaturally. 2 more nights, it whispered. But this time, I recognized I was dreaming immediately. No, I said firmly, this is my dream. You're not welcome here. The entity paused, its void face tilting. Impressive. The others never managed such clarity, but this changes nothing. Your awareness makes the fear all the sweeter. I concentrated, trying to change the dream environment. The graveyard flickered, briefly becoming my classroom at the university, then snapping back to the cemetery. You can't rewrite what I've crafted for you, the Pasusu said. Dreams are my domain, especially Whitaker dreams. It moved closer, and I felt my control slipping. Fear crept back in. Then I remembered my grandmother's words. Mirrors, I whispered. Resonance. The Pasusu hesitated. What if the entity didn't just feed on fear? What if it fed specifically on the particular quality of Whitaker fears? if it was like a mirror reflecting what it consumed. In a flash of insight, I understood what Marie Arnaud might have done. I stopped trying to control the environment and instead focused on controlling myself, my emotions, my response. Instead of fear, I summoned different feelings: calm, acceptance, even compassion. I looked at the ancient nightmare creature and felt pity. The effect was immediate. The Pasusu shuddered, its form becoming less stable, edges blurring. "What are you doing?" Its voice had lost its resonant power, becoming thin, confused. "Feeding you what you can't digest," I said, stepping closer. I thought of Edward, of William, of Richard, of my father, of my grandmother, generations of my family tormented by this entity. But instead of fear or anger, I channeled forgiveness, understanding, peace. The Pasusu's form began to waver like heat off pavement. "Stop, give me your fear, I need it." "You've fed on my family's nightmares for generations," I said calmly, "but that ends with me." I reached out and touched the entity. It felt like plunging my hand into ice water, but I didn't pull back. I pushed emotions toward it that were antithetical to its nature: hope, serenity, joy. The Pasusu screamed, a sound like glass shattering across multiple dimensions. Its form began to collapse in on itself, dark matter swirling like water down a drain. "You cannot destroy me," it hissed, its voice fading. "I am eternal." "Maybe," I replied, "but you won't feed on Whitakers anymore." I woke with first light streaming through the windows. My head pounded, but I felt lighter somehow. I checked my phone and found a response from the Arnaud collection. "Monsieur Whitaker, we have located Marie Arnaud's account of her encounter with the dream parasite. We are attaching the relevant pages to this email. The full document can be reviewed in person at your convenience. It appears your family has a connection to this research. Marie's notes mention a correspondence with a W. Whitaker in America during the late 1920s. Best regards, Claude Arnaud." I opened the attachment with trembling hands. Marie's account, translated from French, confirmed my intuition. The entity requires specific emotional resonance to maintain its connection to our world. It had fed on Arnaud fear for 7 generations, growing powerful enough to affect physical reality. On the final night, when it came to claim me, I denied it what it craved. Instead of fear, I gave it emotions it could not process: love, forgiveness, compassion. These feelings were toxic to its nature. It could not reflect what it could not comprehend. The mirror method worked. The entity's connection to our bloodline was severed. It did not die, for such things cannot truly die. But it was banished from Arnaud dreams forever. That night I dreamed of ordinary things. And the night after that, on what would have been the 3rd and final night according to the Pasusu's countdown, I dreamed of standing in the attic again. The trunk of journals was closed. The air was clear and still. In the corner, I briefly glimpsed a patch of shadow, darker than the rest. But it didn't approach. It couldn't reach me anymore. Part 5. The Legacy. It's been 6 months since I banished the Pasusu from my dreams. I still keep a journal out of habit, but the entries are mundane now. The entity hasn't returned. I've spent this time organizing my family's journals, creating a comprehensive record of our encounter with the dream parasite. I've been in contact with Dr. Patel, the researcher who specializes in transgenerational trauma, and shared dream imagery. Without revealing everything, I've shared enough to contribute to her understanding of how trauma and perhaps other things can echo through generations. I've also maintained correspondence with Claude Arnaud. His family's experience so closely paralleled my own that I can't believe it's coincidence. How many other families have been haunted by such entities? How many didn't find a way to break free? Sometimes I wonder if the Pasusu was truly unique to the Whitakers, or if it was merely one of many such entities, ancient predators that have evolved to hunt through the dreamscape, attaching themselves to bloodlines with particular sensitivities. I still live in the family house. I've made it my own now, renovated and brightened. The attic has been converted into my study, where I keep the journals safely preserved. The trunk sits in the corner, a reminder of what my family endured. I may be the last Whitaker, but perhaps that's fitting. Our family's purpose, unknowingly, was to identify and ultimately defeat the entity that Edward accidentally invited in. It took 5 generations, but we succeeded. Sometimes on the edge of sleep, I think I feel a presence, a shadow lingering just beyond perception. But it can't reach me now. The mirror method created a barrier it cannot cross. Still, I wonder, if such entities exist feeding on human fear through dreams, what else might lurk in those liminal spaces? What other ancient intelligences might we encounter in the territories between waking and dreaming? I keep the dream journals as a warning and a guide. If another family encounters such an entity, perhaps my records will help them break free sooner. Perhaps they won't need 5 generations of suffering to find the answer. The Pasusu was ancient beyond human comprehension. It may have haunted other families before Edward accidentally invited it into our bloodline. It may find another family to feed on now. But at least the Whitaker chapter of its existence is closed. Before I end this account, there's one last thing I haven't shared. Something I found in my grandmother's final journal, on a page stuck to another, that I initially missed. January 2nd, 2022. The entity is weakening me. My time grows short. Daniel needs to know that breaking the connection may not be the end. These entities are patient. They can wait decades, centuries. If Daniel has children someday, the Pasusu may find a way back through them. The mirror method banishes but does not destroy. Vigilance must become our true family legacy. I have no children and don't plan to have any. The Whitaker line ends with me, and with it, the Pasusu's connection to our bloodline. But sometimes I wonder if blood is the only way such entities can form attachments. Can they follow through friendship? Through love? Last week, my new neighbor mentioned having strange dreams since moving in next door. Dreams of a tall shadow that watches from corners. I've invited her over for dinner tonight. I'll show her the journals. I'll teach her the mirror method. I'll help her understand what she's up against. Because some legacies transcend blood. Some responsibilities extend beyond family. The fight against the darkness in our dreams continues. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt watched in your dreams, if you've ever sensed a presence lingering just behind you when you wake in the night, remember what I've shared. They feed on fear. Give them something else instead. This has been the Obscuralore Vault. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share with others who appreciate the darker corners of existence. Leave a comment about your own dream experiences, but be careful what you invite in. Until next time, sleep well.